Hello, my name is Deb Peterman, and I am a transition coordinator for and community connector for the Center for Disability Empowerment. I'm also a project manager for the Ohio Family Network Grant through the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. Thank you for joining us today with this presentation, 911, Let's Get Ready. We all know that this is important to be prepared for an emergency. If you have a disability or are a person with a disability, it may take more planning and preparation to ensure your safety and their safety in their emergency. So please meet Jamie Larmer, and she'll take it from here.
Thank you so much, Deb. I just want to go over a few points to note before we get started. So first, I would like to talk about the Center for Disability Empowerment. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports all people of any age with any disability. And we do this through various programming and our 5 core services, which we are federally mandated to provide as a Center for Independent Living. Those of which being information and referral, independent living skills training, advocacy, whether that's teaching someone how to be an advocate or larger systems advocacy, peer support, and the final core service is transition services. There are 2 parts to that. There is youth transition services, and then Deb here is our nursing home transition coordinator, as she stated. And then also I would like to cover some webinar etiquette before. Attendees will be muted during this webinar. You can use the chat feature in Zoom to post questions and communicate with the host. If you prefer to voice a question, please use the raised hand feature and you will be unmuted. This webinar is being recorded and we will post an archive of the webinar on our YouTube channel. The link will be shared via email along with the slide deck and any resource pages from the speakers and the session evaluation. And with that, I turn things back over to today's moderator.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
I was going to say good morning myself. I'd like for us to test the chat. We're going to ask you questions throughout this session. So if you could test the chat and tell us what your spirit animal is. Who is your spirit animal? What animal is it?
A wolf and a dog.
I love that chameleon. That's awesome.
Thank you, everyone. There are still some answers coming in, so I'll give them a little bit more time before we get started. Okay, are we ready, everyone? I will take that as a yes. Hi, my name is Marley, and I was the project manager for the Emergency Readiness Series my office, the Center for Disability Empowerment, hosted recently. In 2007, I was in a major car accident, which resulted in a T10, T12 spinal cord injury. Now that I am a wheelchair user, I have found that I need to think differently regarding my health and my safety. Today, we will be sharing lots of information and resources to help you process your needs in an emergency. And I'm very excited to be with you all today and to be working with my co-host, Dee Marks.
Thanks, Marley. Hi, everyone. I am Dee Marks, and I am a parent mentor for Dublin City Schools. As such, I help families who have children with a variety of disabilities. I am also a parent of a son with autism and have found that due to his communication limitations, I need to be proactive in understanding what he needs to know prior to an emergency, and then also how to share the information with first responders when he is unable to share it himself. Together, Marley and I hope to better prepare you as well. In the chat, would you quickly share with us what type of emergency most concerns you, as whether you're a person with a disability, a professional, or a caregiver? What type of emergency concerns you the most?
Fire seems to be a big one for everyone. Car accident.
Mhm. I see a lot of fires. I agree with you. And actually, the one that concerns me the most with my son is also fires. And I'll go a little bit more into that later. But I'm also seeing a lot of how to deal in an emergency situation if there's a car accident or a person is with autism is escalated, how to be able to respond effectively to those situations. No accessible escape route. We'll get into that a little bit today too. Well, thank you for sharing. I'd like to also welcome with us today Rigo Quintanilla and Brad Flora. Rigo is with the Dublin Police Department, and Brad is with the Washington Township Fire Department. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been working as a first responder? Rigo, would you like to go first?
Thank you for that introduction, Dee. I've been a Dublin police officer for almost 9 years. I am currently a school resource officer assigned to Davis Middle School. I have previously also been at Sells Middle School, where I actually got to meet Dee's son. I'm familiar with CJ. So I've been with the police department for several years, and I enjoy being in the schools. And so I have a little bit of, actually, I've gotten probably more than the common officers experience in dealing with situations or questions that come with this great resource that you guys are about to do. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and to share police perspective on some of the questions that some of your folks might have, and to be able to assist and have better communication with our community members.
Thank you. Brad, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thanks again for the introduction. I've been with the Washington Township Fire Department in Dublin since part-time since 2001 and full-time in the Fire Prevention Bureau since 2012. I think the big thing with us, I mean, being in the Fire Prevention Bureau, we are involved with a lot more of the education. We have recently started a fire safety education program for students with autism, and we're in the third year. COVID sort of hurt us last year, but we've had some great interactions, and we want to be the ones that are here to share this with any fire departments around, and we're there to help everybody, because fires don't just happen in one area, they happen nationwide.
Absolutely. Great. So I'm going to ask you guys this question. As a first responder, can you share a few situations where you found yourself in the field and you have faced a challenge when helping a person with a disability? So Rigo, can you share a situation where you found yourself in the field and a challenge was brought to your attention based on trying to help someone with a disability?
Well, being in the schools, I actually have a lot of interactions. More so, some of the questions were focused on like fires and um, car accidents, which obviously as police officers and even as EMTs and firefighters, we have a lot of experience. Unfortunately, a lot of experience with those. Um, I have had more experiences in the school buildings and dealing with kids, or mostly students, obviously, because that's who's in the schools with disabilities, and just trying to work through finding what works for them. And some of the experiences that I've had is sometimes is as an officer, sometimes when we arrive on scenes, we want to try and fix everything or make everything back to somewhat normal. And what I've found in some of my experiences in dealing with, depending on the disability, obviously, um, is just slowing down and finding ways to communicate with someone if one of their disabilities is not being able to communicate. For example, I have some experiences with D-Son CJ in just taking the time to slow down and make sure that he's understanding what I'm saying, or at least figuring out ways. And that may sometimes be in speaking with, and I have the benefit here at school of being in contact with his teachers or the people who are his support system, and asking them questions as far as how is he best understand, so that then we can facilitate conversations with that. And then actually, Dee and I talked at length last week about a situation where her son, not necessarily during school, but a school event, just ran away, for lack of a better way of describing it. He ran a different direction than the rest of the team. And she was able to reach out to one of the school resource officers like myself, where CJ was at school at the time. And though that officer was not working, we were able to communicate to other officers who were working, the number one, the importance of finding him as quickly as possible, and some of the things that presented challenges once they did find him, and mostly communication. And once we were able to communicate, then it changes the level of comfort for the officers, for myself, to be able to interact with them and make them feel comfortable, because we all get nervous. Even me as a police officer, if I run into a police officer off duty, your sense of anxiety raises a little bit, even though I know what's happening and what they're trying to do. I can only imagine how someone who doesn't work in this line of field and they see a police officer, all of a sudden their anxiety goes up. And so we try to calm that down and work through situations that way. So again, I'm appreciative of being here in the opportunity, not only for be able to share some of my experiences, but to also learn different ways to be able to help community members with a variety of disabilities.
Thank you. Brad, what about you? What challenges have you faced working with the fire department, in regards to helping a person with a disability in an emergency situation?
I'll start out with Rigo. It's a lot about communication, understanding the person, and realizing that just because a kid has autism or a disability doesn't mean that you'll see the same person. Every person is different. We can't count them all as, hey, they all have autism, they're all going to act the same way. They don't. I was teaching CPR at Dublin schools one time, and what got me was when the fire alarm would go off, they take all the kids with special needs or disabilities out, because they go, it really messes with them. And they had an incident where the fire alarm went off um, accidentally, and they weren't prepared, and one of the kids basically took off. They found him in a bathroom hiding. So from there, that was my big challenge: is we've got to find a better way. And you're not gonna change everybody, but have to find a better way to do some education, and we have to do it individualized. We can't do it in a group. I mean, our program does do it in a group, with a group of like 3 or 4 kids in a school, but sometimes we have to break off and understand that there's only certain levels that certain depending on where they're at on the spectrum, that they understand or they can take in one day. We don't want to overload them to where we freak them out, but we really want to we want to make sure we take care of, anybody with a disability. And the big thing we're doing right now is in the schools, because we have a access point. We don't have any clue unless somebody gets a hold of us what is out there with adults. We don't have the resources, the relationships we have with Dublin schools. So for me, I think the big thing is that's what we want to reach out, show what we have, show where we can help, because we don't know what we don't know.
What about someone just sent me a quick chat? What about both for Rigo and Brad? What about, have you faced a challenge when helping an adult, perhaps someone even in an assisted living facility or within their home and they're wheelchair bound, or those kind of concerns? Can either of you kind of expand a little bit about how you've faced a challenge with that?
Yeah, as Brad was speaking, I was thinking of that. Like we both kind of focused on the younger kids section of it, which we both have a lot of experience. I see Brad around the schools all the time. Yes, one of the biggest differences though that I will say that it benefits us, and I agree with Brad that we don't know what we don't know. And when we show up on something, we have to try to decide that relatively quickly, especially if it's an emergency situation. But we rely a lot on the resources around. So if for example, if you were to call the police to say, hey, I'm having an issue and I need help. Okay, so the dispatcher is going to ask some important questions about what exactly you need, and then the dispatchers, if they have the capabilities or the time, are going to try to get as much information as possible. And sometimes you're able to say, like, you're obviously have been around and doing this work for some time, and you have a great relationship with us as a police department, and you could say, hey, my son has this, and that basically kicks off a different mindset for us as to how important this is. But when we show up like on a scene, for example, like Marley mentioned that she was in a terrible car accident and had an injury, she's still able, assuming she's away, she's still able to communicate with us, and she can tell us, hey, I'm having, my legs don't work or my arm doesn't work. And then we can facilitate a response from that. That's the way kind of we would work through those situations if someone's able to explain to us what's happening. In other situations, we show up where we have very little information, and through very short conversation or very short interaction, we're able to determine that there's something there. And obviously we're not medical people to be able to determine whether it's autism or if they're having just a mental episode or whatever it may be. So we try to gather as much information. Now, I will say our state and our police department and specifically, we've created new policies to where as soon as we determine that there's something not necessarily what we would define as normal, I know that word is not appropriate, but what we would say, they're able to have a direct conversation with me. As soon as we detect that there's something that's off or not, maybe they're just going through a mental episode, our approach has to change immediately and how we deal with them. That doesn't mean we may not change what we ultimately do. It just means we have to analyze, and maybe part of it is just, like I mentioned earlier, is just being more patient as a police officer in dealing with those situations. And we here in Franklin County have had to, there's a couple of different agents through Columbus Police and through the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, where they have a quick response team. If we have a person who's having a psychotic episode, that we can call and rely on them, and basically we kind of contain the situation until someone that from NetCare is actually riding with them, and someone who's a trained professional can assist us through that process. So that's usually how we deal with them. We try to use as much as the information around, and if they're by themselves, then we obviously have to determine that ourselves. And as soon as we get an indication that something is not specific, not necessarily what we would consider an average conversation, then we have to then change our approach. And that may be, okay, we're gonna have to, the normal de-escalation may not work. we may have to go even further down the ladder or up the ladder of de-escalation and just be patient and try and figure out exactly what's going on through communication. So that's, I mean, ultimately it's all about communication, like Brad mentioned and I've mentioned. It's us, as much information as we can draw in. That's what we were trying to do. Let's see if it comes.
Thank you. And that's one of the things we're going to really hit home on in this presentation when Marley and I move forward with it, is how caregivers, professionals, people with disabilities, anyone in the community can better prepare. So that way, when you get there, if they're not able to communicate, they can at least have an effective way of sharing that information with you. Brad, what about you? Any situations related to adults?
Well, one thing we are doing in Dublin, and I don't know if your local fire or EMS does, we also have a special needs registry, and that's for people of all ages. So if we have it to where we know, hey, if you go to this address, you're going to meet Joey. Joey has this, and it helps us going in because it flags us right away in our dispatch. Will let us know, hey, look at your notes. And with that being said, we have a little better understanding going into a run that we might have somebody that is acting different, but it's not they're acting different. They have autism. We need to know how to relate, and it changes the mindset going in. So with that being said, I mean, that's a huge thing. And if you don't have it in your local fire department, I don't have a problem sharing how we do ours. And we got ours from Delaware County to help out, because if we know going in now, if we get on a wreck, like Rigo said, we might not know unless a parent's with them or somebody that understands them. We don't know. So if we are on something, the more you can give us, the better. But I think that special needs registry program has been tremendous for us because it flags the house. Now, granted, if we're going in on a time that they're not at the house or at the school, we got to put 2 and 2 together, or they're at work, we got to put 2 and 2 together. But if we're going to your address and you're registered, it gives us a better picture of how we're going to react.
Thank you. And that's I see a question. How do you sign up for that? You contact your local police department and fire department and ask for specific accommodations to be added into their database. So one of the things that, for instance, that's added for my son is not only the location of his bedroom, because he may not escape within the house, but also if he is, if I'm asking for a police response or whatever, that the sirens are turned off 2 blocks before my home, that the lights are turned off, that they come in using soft voices and only one person approaches at a time. All of these things can be added into that database so they can respond effectively. So thank you, Brad and Rigo, for sharing that part. I think we're going to move forward onto the actual presentation, and I'm pretty sure it's going to answer a lot of questions. And then Brad and Rigo are going to stick around and answer questions as we move along as well. Let's see here. So the focus is, and what you're hearing is, we need to be better prepared. We need to have preparation. We can't prevent an emergency from happening, but if we practice and we prepare, there's a stronger likelihood that we'll survive a significant emergency situation. For the purpose of today's training, I want to ask, what is considered an emergency? Bottom line for us, it's any time a person is hurt or likely to be hurt. We want you to be prepared to act in that situation, and then to also understand both the role of the first responder and your personal role, because they are different. Speaking of being prepared, let's watch a short video clip of Marley with the fire department during an emergency stairwell exit.
One second as I set up the video.
Should I get started and speak while we're waiting on the video?
Yeah, please.
So just to tell you guys a little bit, this video of me was taken when we had a power outage at the office. So the elevators were not working at that time. It was an emergency, but there was no immediate danger for me. And I actually tried to roll down the stairs backwards. That's something I've been taught how to do. Halfway down the stairwell, we realized that I can't clear the next landing in there. So we ended up having to call the fire department to come and rescue me for the last 4 or 3 flights down. Do you think that's
No, I will hold
Is this
still.
all one piece though?
Yes.
It's not gonna come apart?
It shouldn't. I've been in it all day and it hasn't so far. But
Okay,
it helps to go
but-
backwards, guys.
That's gonna help to go this way or not?
No,
Okay.
I will hold
Is
still.
this all one piece though?
Yes.
It's not gonna come apart?
It shouldn't. I've been in it all day and it hasn't so far. But
Okay,
it helps to
but-
go backwards, guys.
That's gonna help to go this way, you want, lean you back.
Okay.
And then, yep, we can take turns once we get down. You guys do a landing, and we'll landing.
they didn't take turns. They powered through all the way down.
3,
Coming out of here. I like this guy.
Okay, so should there have been a real fire, the elevators would have been shut off and we would not have been so casual in the moment. And had we not done this at that time, it would have been incredibly dangerous for me to try to go down the stairs on my own, only to realize that I can't clear the landing. So in the chat box, please put a quick yes or no as to whether you would need special accommodations in order to evacuate a building if you're on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th floor. Okay. A lot of no's and some yeses are coming through. Thank you, everyone. So in a fire situation, in any building, anywhere you go, if you are unable to use the stairway, several things should occur in the case of a power outage, fire, or explosion. If you're alone, are you safe and able to call 911 for help? If not, are you able to get to a safe place before calling 911? Inform the dispatcher exactly where you are and where you will be. Name of the building, the floor, the stairway, what room number you're in. Most buildings have a fire safe wall in the stairway, so that's always generally where you will meet first responders if you cannot get down on your own. But also, depending on your disability or your abilities, you might be carried down like I was in the video. Sometimes you'll be transferred into an evacuation chair and carried down, or they could also use a sheet to carry you down. So honestly, it just depends on the station and their resources, I feel. And this is why planning is so important. It really is up to you to make sure that you stay safe until first responders arrive. If someone is with you, are they able to help you down? Some people practice their evacuation plans with coworkers during office fire drills. Planning can save you precious time that you might not otherwise have. If someone is with you, but they're not able to help you evacuate the building, they can at the very least confirm to the first responders that you are in the building and unable to get out due to a disability. Again, using specific language such as on the 3rd floor stairway, 2nd floor, room 10, left of the elevator. Specific details without being wordy or long-winded. Keep it short and keep it simple. For those of us living in the Columbus area, you could explore something called the Knoxbox for your house. It is provided for free, and we have applications available for those interested. Usually, first responders would break down doors that are locked to get to the person on the other side. So the Knoxbox is a locked key box that is placed at the top of your front door. Should first responders need to get to you, they can use their master key to unlock the box, grab your house key from that box, and unlock your door. This is a wonderful program because, especially considering that the alternative means that your door would get broken down and you will likely have to cover the cost of getting it fixed. Plus, I feel like that's a lot of precious time saved for first responders to be able to just unlock your door versus breaking through it. One thing to keep in mind about the Knoxbox is that it can be an indicator to those that know what it is, that there is a person with a disability that lives in that house. That might mean that you are considered an easy target for break-in. If there is a gas leak, evacuate the building quickly, but you'll likely be able to use the elevator in that instance. A water incident could go honestly either way for those of us who use durable medical equipment. My manual wheelchair would be hard to push depending on the level of water, but I wouldn't be worried about damaging the motherboard or the motor. And power wheelchairs are expensive, guys. I mean, $40,000 and over, we're talking. In a situation like this, firefighters will help those that are still in an immediate danger. Home or building fire, they will run through the crowd to get to the people that are still in the building and get them out. They will try to contain the fire and hopefully subdue it. They will tend to those who need immediate medical attention first, then move down the list of priorities. Remember, it is your job to stay safe long enough for them to be able to reach you. There are way more of us than there are of them, and we will need to help ourselves until first responders can get to us.
Thank you, Marley, for that information. Another point to consider is that sometimes a person with some types of disabilities may not understand the full concept of why a fire is dangerous. In this case, it's important to focus on using language and practice strategies that are relevant to the individual to ensure action on their part, even if they don't comprehend the full situation. For instance, my son would most likely not exit if he saw a fire, because no matter how much we practice, I'm definitely not going to use actual fire in order to show him that it can be painful. Unfortunately, it means that most likely in a real fire, he's not going to try to escape until he is hurt or he realizes the pain, and that is much too late. So with him, I've taught him that when he hears the smoke alarm, he is to leave the house. I can replicate that situation for practicing as often as I need to in order for it to become basic motor planning for him. He hears the alarm, he goes outside, and he knows to go to our neighbor Christy's house. This brings me to the most important thing that you need to hear for this whole presentation. In all of these situations that we talk about today, please remember to take a look at the overarching theme and then personalize it to the individual. We will give you good information, but it needs to be modified to meet the needs of the individual in order to maximize its effectiveness. When there is a medical emergency, usually an EMS response is the one that's warranted. Sometimes an EMS team from the local fire department will arrive first due to their proximity to your home. In either case, an ambulance should only be called for emergencies that need to get that patient transported quickly for treatment or to stabilize a person quickly. The EMS on site, just like both of our first responders here with us today have indicated, are going to ask a bunch of questions about the injury or the medical situation. As a person with a disability, it is imperative that one of the first things you do is to share what your mode of communication is. If it's writing, indicate that so that you can write out what you need. If it is a speech generating device, point to that, indicate that you need that device in order to communicate. If it's sign language, indicate that. For you to receive prompt treatment, they need to know how to best approach the interview part of the evaluation. We want them to get the best and most accurate information as efficiently as possible so that stabilizing treatment can begin. Be sure to share with them all of the medications that you take daily. Have them written down, have them on your phone. Even if they're over-the-counter meds, this information is critical, especially when you go to the hospital, for the hospital team, in order to ensure that there's no contradictory medications, or perhaps a situation that might be more pronounced because of a medication. And I'll talk about maybe the use of ibuprofen later in this presentation. It is also important to share with the EMS team if you have specialized equipment that you need while you're at the hospital. Just in case you're admitted, you want that equipment to go with you. A few examples of why you would want to call the 911 for an EMS response are a serious injury, broken bones, heavy bleeding, a head injury, just to name a few, choking, heart attack, possible stroke, incoherence, and an overdose. What you're going to want to know right off the bat is you're going to share your name, your location. You need to be able to describe the injury or medical crisis. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What happened right before the injury? The number of the people that are injured or involved, especially in the case of a car accident, so that we can make sure that enough responders report to the scene. Any information about the disability that the EMS team should know before they arrive. So while you're on the phone with the dispatcher, for instance, I mentioned earlier, turning off the sirens, approach slowly. Anything that you think that they might need to know that you can share with that dispatcher, and it can be shared en route in order to make it a more efficient response when they actually get on scene. Marley, would you like to talk to us about a response from a police?
Sure thing. Thank you. When talking to dispatchers, there are several things that you want to go over first. What is it? If you're in a domestic dispute situation, you want to find a safe place in the home to lock yourself in and call the police. Give them your name, your address, describe your partner. And if you're able to stay on the line with the dispatchers until first responders arrive, do so. If there is a person with an intellectual disability in the home or even a physical disability in the home, make sure to inform dispatchers of that, what they look like and how best to approach them. If you can escape the home, do so. Head to the nearest safe space you can think of. Once safe, call 911. A break-in or a robbery situation, the same thing could apply. Stay quiet and stay hidden. If able to exit the home safely, do so and call the police. If you have been trained properly to defend yourself, that's wonderful. However, if you are not trained for your safety and the safety of other members in the home, stay quiet and escape out of the home if possible. Let them take whatever they take because it is not worth your safety and that of your family members. A noise complaint, we all do it. We all sometimes call on our neighbors. They're partying too much, too loud. It's 3 a.m. So they're pretty common. In the missing person situation, you're going to call the police. You're going to tell them the name of the person, their age, the clothing they were wearing, who they were with, and where they were last seen. If this is a person with an intellectual disability, describe the nature of the disability and how best to approach them when found. Police are there to stop the threat first. An example of that would be an active shooter or the robber. They cannot help you, the victim, until the threat is no longer a threat. After that, they will tend to your needs and anyone else in the crowd based on the priority. You must keep in mind that you may have to wait your turn. It can take time, but stay calm and try not to lash out at first responders. Remember that there are steps each first responder must take before tending to you. For example, if there's a gunshot victim, of course, they're going to tend to the gunshot victim first and then proceed down the list of individuals present. D.
Thank you. When we experience a trauma or a stressful life event like those that we are discussing today, research has shown that people have many different types of reactions. They may feel physically and mentally drained. Some have difficulty making decisions or staying focused. They state that they feel almost as if they're in a fog. Many experience changes to their sleep patterns or in their eating habits. Feeling sad, tired, numb, lonely, or worried are common experiences following a trauma. All of these may lead the person to become easily frustrated and might even lead to arguments with families and friends, which might not have occurred otherwise. After any crisis, it is okay to feel these things. It's actually normal. What's important, though, is for you to recognize how you are feeling and being honest with yourself about it so that you can become action-oriented. This will take time. Getting ourselves and our lives back doesn't happen overnight. Trauma changes us. We need to give ourselves time to regulate to that new normal. So what action steps can we take as individuals to help us feel more even-footed during a time where our world has shifted? The first and most important thing we can do is to ensure that we're safe. This means finding a place to stay, addressing your physical health needs by getting medical attention if it's needed, and having access to food, water, and medication. Hoping to feel a bit more in control is taking care of things that we can control, like choosing to eat healthy foods, getting rest, and staying connected with family and friends. These help to mentally ground us while we start to make decisions. During this time, remember to be patient with yourself and those around you. You may need more time to figure out what to do. Meanwhile, others are giving you advice and suggestions at a pace much faster than you can deal with. This can add to the feeling that you aren't in control. It's okay to remind them that you know that they want to help you, and then thank them for caring so much. But also be just as honest that you need to step back and think things through a bit. That is okay, and it's much less stressful than making a rash decision that later you have to deal with. After some time, you might find that you aren't feeling any better. You might still be feeling angry, overwhelmed, or frustrated all of the time, or perhaps you're not eating, or you're eating too much, or you're not sleeping, or you're sleeping too much. You may be feeling hopeless. When is this normal, and when should you seek additional assistance? Rule of thumb is that if you are feeling this way or experiencing these symptoms for longer than 2 weeks, then it's probably time to reach out and talk to a professional, a therapist, social worker, church leader, or psychologist, just to name a few. These are all trained professionals that can help you work through your experience and emotions in a way that can help you find a better balance towards moving forward. Oftentimes, the police officer that responds or the hospital can give you information on these resources. Don't discard this information, as it often will be a bit of time before you realize that you actually need to reach out to someone. So hold on to it. Rigo and Brad, we've been talking about the role of the first responder versus our personal role. Is there anything that either of you would like to add as far as that role position before we move on to how to prepare for specific types of emergencies?
First of all, I want to say the information that you're providing is great. I think that you guys are covering all of the necessary information, which I feel like I kind of stole some of your thunder by answering some of the questions earlier, and everything that I mentioned earlier was covered here. But the only thing to add is, yes, just and you guys mentioned it, but just to be patient with us, because like you said, as Marley said, we're showing up to address whatever the situation is. If it's an active threat, whatever it may be, or even if it's a crash, we're looking for, if we happen to beat the fire department there, which doesn't happen too often, but we're looking to try and save lives and protect lives in whatever way possible. And so while it seems heartless or brutal to say, hey, it may seem that we don't care because we're walking by people as we're doing other things, someone who potentially needs our help, but we're trying to address what we feel is the most important thing at that time. And then from there, like she stated, we come back and address issues as we feel the level of importance is. And so I think this is excellent information.
Thank you. I was going to say, Brad, do you have anything?
Yeah, with what Rigo said, that's the big thing is just because we go by somebody please don't think that you're any less important. We just have to go to the worst to the least. Now, we also don't know. So if there's a time that you're like, man, I know Jackie and Jackie's not acting right, I mean, we need to know that. So you might have to be the advocate. You might have to say, I understand you think this, but this is not. Because if we don't know what's normal, we won't know what's abnormal. So communication's a key. Just make sure you advocate, because we're not around anybody enough to know what's normal unless we know them on a day-to-day basis. So you might have to advocate for yourself or for someone else.
Great. Thank you both for sharing some additional information there. Now, Marley and I would like to go in to how to prepare for specific types of emergencies. Obviously, we cannot cover every eventuality or every way to prepare, but our goal today is to give you some of the basic information and getting you to think about how to personalize it for your particular situation. Marley, would you be willing to go ahead and move forward towards talking on how to prepare for a fire?
Yes, I will do my best. So, how to prepare for a fire. First, install fire alarms. Your local Red Cross team could actually assist you with those. Check them monthly. Replace batteries as needed. Have a gas and water shutoff tool. Have a gas shutoff tool. Have a primary and secondary escape routes in the home. Getting out the front door, the back door, or the windows. If you have a house with 2 or more floors, have you considered adding ladders and having them readily available up there? Where are you meeting your family once outside? Make sure to have a specific location planned, across the street or at the neighbor down the road. Once out of immediate danger, call 911. Things to consider. Place important paperwork together in a secure but easily accessible location in the home where you can grab them and go. It is recommended that you have more than one copy securely stashed away. Important paperwork could be birth certificates, social security cards, medical records, medication lists, financial documentation, mortgage and insurance paperwork. And another thing to consider is having a fireproof safe or a fireproof document bag. And it looks kind of like this, where you can secure all your items and protect them should a fire break out. Now, in chemical exposure, you can install a carbon monoxide detector in the home, and I believe the local Red Cross team can assist with that as well. Also have a gas and water shutoff tool, which kind of looks like this. This is really big, but that's a 2-in-1 package. And then things to consider in that situation. If you're outside and there has been a chemical exposure, move away as far away from the affected area until you are breathing fresh air. Stay calm, call 911. If you are indoors and there has been a chemical exposure, exit the building quickly and find fresh air. Again, stay calm, call 911. If you are exposed to chemicals through your clothing, it is recommended that you take those clothes off as quickly as possible, wash them, take them off and wash off your body as quickly as possible with water. Do not place your clothing with other personal belongings because those could be contaminated, and in certain cases they can transmit through contact. So be careful with clothes that you take off. Best to probably just throw them in a garbage bag. If your eyes are exposed to chemicals or gases, rinse them with water as quickly as possible. If you've been exposed for a prolonged period of time and you're feeling sick, head to the ER as quickly as possible for treatment. Some symptoms can include watery and burning eyes, headaches, vomiting, nausea, and then in severe instances. If you were exposed to chemicals from containers or cleaning products, those tend to have instructions on what to do if you are exposed, and there is the number for poison control. Now Dee is going to take it over again.
Yep. Thank you, Marley. When you've experienced an injury, the first thing to do is to assess whether it's one that can be treated at home with basic over-the-counter items or whether you need to be seen by a professional. If you are unsure, then getting in to have a professional evaluate the injury is probably best. It is important to consider what medications you have been taken by the individuals, as they also might impact the injury. And this goes back to what I was stating earlier with an EMS response. Some medications can cause an injury to be much worse than what would naturally be assumed. For instance, someone who takes a lot of ibuprofen, they may bleed more. And so an injury which involves bleeding may actually be more serious than if they did not take that medication. Another consideration is the impact of the disability on the response. Someone with autism could have such a severe fear with the sight of blood, and some neurotypicals have a severe fear of blood as well. And it's so intense that it causes their heart rate to increase dramatically. In a bleeding situation, that's going to cause more pumping of blood. So we have to consider these things. As we've stated before, it's really important to know the full circumstances as much as you're able to, so that you can react appropriately. Knowing this information is really helpful when in an emergency and having to relay it to a dispatcher quickly. So what types of injuries should you be prepared for at home? Some examples include minor cuts, minor bruises, minor burns, and splinters. Think about, just the little things we're always helping our kids at home with, right? Those are things we should be prepared for within our home. So to do those, you need a first aid kit. Within your first aid kit, thank you, Marley's showing us one, you should have items like antiseptic wipes, Band-Aids of various sizes, Neosporin, thermometer, gauze tape, Tylenol, ibuprofen, Benadryl, and tweezers. And most over the counter, you can buy the small ones to put in your car. You can buy the bigger ones. Most of them have these basic supplies and you can buy them pre-made, or if you have these supplies at home, gather them, kind of keep them in one area. You want to have access to all of them at one time in case you need that. Each house should have at least one. I actually have one on each floor because I never know where my son is going to get clumsy and get a boo-boo. And then you also should have a basic first aid kit in your car, whether you keep it in the glove box where I keep it, or you keep it in the trunk, or just any other compartment. A med kit, on the other hand, is one that's used to treat more serious injuries and has items to use in a trauma situation. Items in a med kit might include things like PPE. A year ago, none of us knew what that was. Now we know. That's having gloves, mask, eye protection, things like that. We also need patient assessment tools in a med kit. That could be items that are used to assess and measure vital function. So a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, a micropulse oximeter, a thermometer, and a CO2 monitor. There should be trauma supplies. So these are tools designed to stop bleeding or to seal off a penetrating trauma. Some examples of that are hemostatic dressings of different sizes and purposes, a large assortment of regular dressing in multiple sizes, a combination of bandage wraps, especially have the 4-inch and the 6-inch size, heavy duty 1-inch and 2-inch tape, open chest injury seals, multiple sizes of that are preferred, and tourniquets. We also might have airway breathing management equipment in there, and it can range all the way from a simple airway kit to a full airway management pack. And that equipment might have basic airway stabilization protection, such as an oral or nasal airway, a pocket mask, or a manual suction device. It might have a collapsible bag valve mask or chest compression supplies, or it may actually have more invasive airway controls, such as intubation materials. As you can see, a med kit is prepared to deal with quite serious injuries, similar to what an EMS would carry. At home, you don't necessarily need this unless your child has a medical condition that or the person with a disability has a medical condition that indicates that you need this level of trauma care equipment. You should maintain a first aid kit with items that you can personally use and don't require significant medical training to use. And it's important, this is really important, that you replenish your first aid kit as fast as you use the items to ensure that you have what you need when you need it. There's absolutely nothing worse than open that first aid kit looking for a Band-Aid and it's not there. It's been used. So now I'd like to talk about a little bit about assaults. The thought of an assault is terrifying to all of us. There are a few things that we can do to protect ourselves, though. I want you to consider the following options and how they relate to your environment. At home, make sure your windows and doors are kept locked. Have a peephole if it's possible. If possible, use a deadbolt for your exterior doors. Having an alarm system is also beneficial. A little known trick that I've been told about, and that I actually do, is when you buy a car, you're often given 2 sets of key fobs, okay? I keep one in the very top drawer in a little box, so it's easy for me to reach in and feel it in my nightstand next to my bed. And this trick is if I would hear something that doesn't sound right. We all know noises of our house. We all know and can identify, oh, that's the cat jumping down and I'm going to, hang him by his tail tomorrow for waking me up at 3 a.m. versus that was glass breaking. That's not a normal sound. Or I hear footsteps on the steps and I can hear my son sleeping in the other room. When you're in that situation, you could press the panic button on your keychain. And what that does is it's going to set your car alarm off. That is so loud that it is bound to wake up neighbors. And that's exactly what you want to do because it can be a natural deterrent, just like an alarm system in your house, to that person who's just come into your home. Hopefully it's going to scare off that intruder. Within the community, you can carry a can of Mace as a protection device. One of the things I do, I don't carry Mace, but I carry a tiny little 99-cent bottle of hairspray from Target, Walmart, wherever you shop, right? Even, John Eagle. And sometimes I have a bad hair day. I use it as a natural resource to make this little bouffant thing work better. But other times I know that it's in my purse or in my carry bag. And if somebody would go to attack me or get to me, I can spray this towards their eyes. Hairspray is naturally sticky. Not only is it going to burn, but it's going to stick to their eyelashes. It's going to stick to their face, and it's going to buy you a moment to escape. So this is something simple that you can keep, and all of us, almost all of us, can use it on a daily basis anyhow. You can also carry your keys in your hand. So like I said, most of us have key fobs now. So I see a lot of people just carrying the fob, right? Because they keep their inner door in the garage unlocked. Go ahead and put your house key on there. This is more than about access to your house. This is about safety. You can put this key between when you're leaving work or leaving somewhere. You can have your keys ready in your hand. Put the key between your fingers like this as you're walking, and the fob in your fist so that it's firm. This is a basic weapon that you can have with you at all times. If somebody comes and approaches you, I don't want you to use this and try to go for their arm. You're not going to do any damage. You go for the eye, because even if you miss the eye, the whole area around that eye is super sensitive, and that's going to prompt them to hopefully back away. So again, these are things that you have with you at all times. Think about them as weapons. What we're trying to help you understand is we want you to think about what weapons you have before you actually need a weapon. Some other examples are a flashlight, an umbrella. So I keep my umbrella when you open the car door and then you have the car seat. There's that little piece between the car seat and the car door. And I don't keep it on the door handle. I actually keep it in just the little area where the seatbelt would connect. I leave this there. I don't leave it in the back. I don't leave it in the back seat. And that way, when I open my door, if somebody tries to attack me, that's right there for me to grab. I can pick it up, I can hit him with it this way, or I can pop it up, right? Which gives me a longer range of motion and just beat the crap out of them, right? That's my goal. Beat the crap until they back away. You can also use your purse, a bag that you're carrying, anything to hit the person. These are all really important techniques to just think about that any of us can use. And it's with any item. Pay attention to your surroundings. Officer Quintanilla shared with me that he calls it hardening the target. And what he means by that is making yourself someone harder to attack. So when a person who is looking for an easy target looks at you, they're like, I better move on to an easier target. That person is paying attention. A few ways to do this: keep your head up. Do not be looking down on your phone. Do not be texting. There's no way you're truly paying attention to your environment if you're doing that. Have your keys out and ready before you leave a building. And avoid walking alone in the dark. If you're at work, consider having someone escort you to your car if it's dark, or leave with a group of colleagues at night. You could even have a planned leaving time that you guys all leave together. We are instinctive creatures. That's who we are. Our survival mode puts us into fight or flight. So if something feels off, trust your instinct and get to safety. Don't wait for there to be an apparent sign. Trust your instinct. If you're really concerned about being assaulted, you could also contact your local police department and they can give you recommendations on where to take self-defense classes. In the chat box, I'd like for you to quickly share some other everyday items you think that could be used to defend yourself when you're out in the community. Each of you probably have other things that you have in your car, in your purse, that could be used for self-defense, and you might give an idea to somebody else. So share some items that you could potentially use.
Dee, may I chime in really very quickly?
Absolutely.
I have a very large flashlight in my hand right now. I don't know if you guys can see this camera, but I have one just this big in my car because I am a manual wheelchair user. So I'm not likely to be able to reach someone because they're not at my eye level. So I can use this, though, to inflict a little bit of some pain and hopefully some for me to be able to escape. And then for a lot of us who have a physical disability, we might be thinking, oh, I'm not going to be able to defend myself properly. There's no way I can defend myself. I'm in a wheelchair. I'm physically disabled. There's no way. Well, one, you have to rethink that narrative. Think about the things that you can do versus the things that you cannot do, and then go from there. Like Dee mentioned, you could be seen as an easy target. I know I sometimes feel like an easy target getting in and out of my car or going out on my own. But I've also been told that because I look like this, I could also even potentially surprise an attacker with what I'm capable or not capable of doing. So honestly, really think deep about what you are able to do and then build on that.
Some of the other things that people mention is to have a whistle. That's a great idea. Or a pen. Pens are sharp as well. Someone mentioned your voice. Absolutely. Make yourself heard. Scream. Okay. Someone mentioned that having a flashlight is also a great temporary block to or limit their vision. If you turn it on and shine it in their eyes, you know, so you can blind first and hit second. Someone says they do carry mace, and they telling help to scream. One of the things that they tell you to scream is not to scream help, but to scream fire. And the reason being is we have become desensitized as a society to the word help. But if you scream fire, everybody's going to look to see where the fire is. It's just our natural voyeuristic nature. So take advantage of that. I love this. Somebody put a collapsible hot dog roasting stick. It's a campfire tool. I love that.
And
okay.
your home can be used as a tool. Really, it's just a matter of, again, changing that narrative.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Those are great ideas. So Marley, let's take it to the break-in and robbery situation.
Okay. So again, if you're hearing footsteps, breaking glass, opening and closing doors, shuffling and of furniture being moved around in your house, you know no one's home, so nothing should be moving around. Like Dee mentioned, stay calm. If you can escape, do so quickly. Where again, think about your escape routes in the home because we already planned those out. Hide if you're not able to escape as best as you can and try to keep the noise low. When you call 911, excuse me, provide them with your name, address, location, and if others are with you, the person with an intellectual disabilities in the home, explain that to 911, and make sure you tell them how to approach that person. If the intruders are visible, try to keep identifying markers in the back of your mind. Report details to the first responder. Is the intruder tall, short? What are their eye color, hair color? Are they male or female? I have 2 tattoos on my hands. So if I commit a robbery and someone sees my hands, I'm not wearing a glove, they can say, she's got a tattoo that reads, just be you on her hand. That is distinctive. I have all these moles and freckles all over my face. Those are also very distinctive things about me. I'm a wheelchair user. That is pretty distinctive. So if the police are looking for someone with a tattoo on their hand, a wheelchair user, and then freckled, that they got me red-handed. They caught me. So what are you wearing? What do you have? Do they have visible tattoos or features that can ID them? Again, if you have a weapon on hand, it could be held, but keep in mind that most weapons require training. Without practice or training, a weapon could be more dangerous. Again, this is very repetitive information because it does kind of work in the same thing as other situations too. Do you have a garage door? Is it properly closed? Are there security cameras? You can easily purchase security cameras on Amazon now and monitor them via your smartphone or Alexa or Google Home. Again, the spare key, consider having that next to your bed. If you hear noises, that alarm will go off and hopefully will deter the intruders. Nothing is fail-proof. However, you are more likely to survive if you plan, prepare, and practice different scenarios. At best, you could learn to process the situation quickly, not panic, and respond more effectively instead of reacting. And now Dee is going to talk about drug overdose.
Thanks, Marley. Watching the news, we are almost inundated with stories of drug overdoses. It's heartbreaking and just terrifying. We need to be more prepared than we often are for this situation. Consider having the number for poison control listed right in your phone contacts. It's actually on the slide for you. If you want to program your phone right now, I'm good with that. As of one of only 55 American Association of Poison Control regional certified centers, the Central Ohio Poison Control, it provides state-of-the-art poison prevention, assessment, and treatment for 64 out of the 88 counties. It handles, just to give you an idea of how much of a problem this is, it handles more than 42,000 poison exposure calls annually. Okay, that is just the Central Ohio Poison Control Center. It is confidential and it offers free emergency poison treatment advice, and it's available to the public 24/7. You may also be interested in participating in the Be Poison Smart program. It's going to teach you poison prevention education, and it's through the Ohio Department of Health, Head Start, and the Ohio Hospital Association. So there's some big names that are involved in this to try to help families be more proactive. So if you think someone may be poisoned, you certainly can call the poison control number at 1-800-222-1222. But How can we be preventative? This is our purpose today. How do we plan ahead of time? How can we be proactive? And one of the most important things you can do is properly dispose of any medications that you are no longer required to use. Many cities have drug take-back days and locations where unneeded prescription medication can be dropped off or be turned in to be disposed of safely. Do not throw it away in a trash can where it can be accessed by someone else or by an animal, or flush it down the toilet. If someone you know has overdosed on a medication and they are still alert and they're able to share what has happened, then the Poison Control Center can usually tell you what you need to do in order to ensure the person stays stabilized. If they are unconscious or no longer breathing, call 911 immediately, and the dispatcher can talk you through how to help the individual until the EMS arrives. If you hear a lot about Narcan today on the news, and if you're interested in learning about it, it's a prescription medicine used for the treatment of known or suspected opioid overdose emergencies with signs of breathing problems and severe sleepiness or not being able to respond at all. You can contact your local fire department about upcoming trainings and how to get Narcan to keep on hand in case of an emergency. But Project Dawn is also providing free Narcan kits, and I've written that on the slide, to individuals and groups across the state of Ohio. And if you're interested in ordering a kit, you can simply Google Project Dawn, Ohio Department of Health, and you can look up the sites by each county where you can get a free kit, and it has the Narcan in it, why you use it, when you use it, and how to use it. It's a great opportunity for us to get the Narcan out in our community in case it's ever needed. A common event for many people are when we miss a dose of medication. Usually we can take it when we remember and everything's going to be just fine. Sometimes though, missed medication can cause a medical crisis. In this case, we need to call 911 immediately for medical help. For instance, someone who is diabetic and doesn't take their insulin as directed by their medical professional can experience quite concerning symptoms such as disorientation, severe fatigue. They can become unconscious and even go into a diabetic coma. These are serious issues and they can lead to death. It is imperative to prepare for medication intake by first making sure that you have the medication on hand that you require. Keep your prescriptions filled in a timely manner. Most pharmacies offer automatic refills and they'll contact you to let you know your prescription medication is ready to be picked up. My sons are on an automatic thing and they'll text me and say, are you ready to refill? I type 1, which means yes. Then they text me back and say, we will refill it. And then when it's done, they text me and let me know that it's ready to be picked up. So I don't have to think about, oh, in 5 days, I'm going to run out. So that's a really great way to kind of set that up as a reminder for you. Another thing to consider is, how are you going to remember what times to take it? Okay. You can use a pill box, an electronic pill dispenser, an app, or a calendar reminder. Pharmacists can even dispense the medication in pill sleeves or bubbles. So you know how when you buy a pack of Tylenol, 2 Tylenol tablets are in one little pill bubble, right? What they can do is take all your morning meds and put them in one pill bubble. And it will say breakfast on the back of it, and it'll say what's in there. And then you just open that little pill sleeve and the pills that you need for breakfast are in there. This is extremely beneficial for people with disabilities who might confuse when to take a particular medication or struggle maybe to open the bottles, and being able to have it in that little pill sleeve is easier for them. They can use scissors to cut it open. When thinking about an overdose or a missed medication, pre-planning your action is imperative to ensure an appropriate and a timely response. So Marley's going to talk to us about when you have personal equipment that you need to be aware of.
Thank you, Dee. So for many of us, using durable medical equipment is what keeps us moving. I can't walk, but I can roll and move around with relative ease. However, I also need to think about what to do should my wheelchair break down. Here are some things to consider as you think about your equipment. Create a list of all your durable medical equipment. Have basic tools and backups for spare parts. For example, I have a backup cushion for my wheelchair. I also have backup nuts and bolts in case I break down. I also have a backup wheelchair if my backup wheelchair, sorry, should I break down completely. I also have considered folding a yoga mat and sitting on it should my spare cushion also break down. So there's different things that we can think about and process. It is also recommended that you have photos of your equipment as well as their model, type, and serial numbers. I would also recommend you speak to your durable medical equipment providers about their internal process for replacing damaged or stolen equipment. An example is if your DME is stolen, your provider might need to see a copy of the police report as proof to be able to replace your equipment. The same could apply for controlled medications, such as pain pills. You have to speak to your providers and ask them what documentation they need, if any. If destroyed medical equipment is okay, sorry, I'm reading through my stuff. You can also request, you can talk to your durable medical equipment and medical supply companies on replacing chucks that you need, gloves, catheters, any of that. So again, you can talk to your providers and find out exactly what their process will require of you if something should happen. Those of you who use power wheelchairs may want to consider having a manual wheelchair as a backup should the battery need to be preserved or the battery just dies on you. This is more realistic for sheltering in place examples, such as snowstorms or what happened with COVID-19. But consider what you would need in order to be able to survive short-term and potentially long-term, given a situation where your power wheelchair cannot be used or accessed. And these are service animals.
Yep. So another thing we need to consider when we're thinking about personal equipment, right, is our service animals. They're important to consider in an event of an emergency. Dogs who are acknowledged by the American Disabilities Act as service animals perform the following task. They act as a guide dog for the visually impaired. They act as a hearing or signal dog for a person with a significant hearing loss or is deaf. And they're a seizure response dog or perhaps a psychiatric service dog, but they're all specifically trained to understand the needs of their person that they're supporting and also to lessen some of the effects of how that disability impacts their lives. As I said, these animals are trained according to a rigorous curriculum and are trained to provide support directly related to the person's disability. They are as important as a prosthetic leg to an amputee. Therefore, these animals can usually accompany an individual to a shelter or a hospital. However, you do need to know that if a service animal is out of control, it's barking, jumping, interfering with the service being provided, or if it's a direct threat to the health and safety of others, then that service animal may be removed even under American Disability Act guidelines. Thinking of the stress of an emergency, people will often assume that an emotional support animal can accompany them. However, even though the event itself might be very stressful for someone, emotional support animals are not covered by the American Disabilities Act. Depending on your location, they might be covered by your local laws, though. So one of the things thinking about planning is you need to research your laws and know what those are and whether or not an emotional support animal is able to accompany you following an emergency to a place like a shelter or a hospital. So when you have a service animal, what can you do to make sure things go as smoothly as possible in a time of crisis? You've got to have a plan. First, be prepared to explain to the first responders that you have a service animal and that you have a legal right to be evacuated with your service animal. Explain how the dog helps you and what it specifically does to allow you to be independent. Shelters and hospitals are not prepared to shelter your dog. So make sure you have a to-go kit specifically made up for them. Some items to include in that bag are food, water, dishes, ID tags, an extra harness or leash, vet contact information, their shot records, any medications they take, a blanket, a favorite toy, and any other items that you know help make your service animal feel comfortable. Another really important item to consider and to plan for is to be prepared to function without the assistance of your service animal. As Marley indicated earlier with the powered wheelchair, if her battery dies, she's got to have a backup plan. If your service animal is injured in the emergency, they may not be able to perform their duties. And so it's best when you're practicing for emergency preparedness that you do drills with your service animal, but also without your service animal using alternative methods just to be prepared for both scenarios. Marley?
So on the slide that we're on right now, it gives you examples of what an emergency info card may look like. Examples could include, but they're not limited to your name, an ID, a picture of you, your communication style, address, phone number, email, disability, primary durable medical equipment. Again, don't forget the model, type, and serial numbers, allergies, and medications. Do you have an emergency contact person? And make sure you include their name and their phone number. And try to have more than one emergency contact. It is also recommended that you have at least one emergency contact out of state should your state be in the middle of an evacuation and a mass emergency. So having someone out of state that you can reach out to and connect with as you're evacuating would be incredibly helpful for you. Some other details could include your secondary mode of communication, going from a speech device to a paper and pen or a whiteboard and markers. Your secondary durable medical equipment, going from your power wheelchair to a manual wheelchair, doctors and their contact information, the dependents, your children or adult parents, if applicable to you. And include pictures of them as well, if you're able. And then Dee is going to take it over from here.
Thanks, Marley. Before we go into the Q&A, Brad and Rigo, is there anything you'd like to add quickly related to how to best prepare for emergencies? Brad, we'll start with you.
A few things real quick I want to talk about, and then we can maybe hit later. When you're talking about fire escape plans, one thing we're hitting hard on is sleeping with your door closed. There is a website, and it's like closeyourdoor.org. There's a video showing the difference of a room where in the same hallway where a fire goes through, where the doors open and close, and it's a matter of life or death. So we know we're not going to be able to get out quickly in a fire if we have everything ready, let alone if we have a issue where we have a wheelchair, we got to get out. It's very important to keep that door closed at night, because that could be what saves your life. The other thing is, when you get out, stay out. Let the professionals do our job. Let us know. Our cops are amazing. They get on scene. They're telling us, pulling up, hey, you have one person inside. We know what we're doing. We've seen too many times around the nation where people go back in, and they go back in for their loved one or a pet or something, and they don't make it back out. So, and then here's my key thing, and my wife even hits me on this. When I go to a hotel, I go to a restaurant, I go any place, look at all your exits. Make sure you have two ways out, whether it's a fire or an active shooter or something. Everybody is trained to go out the way we came in, and that kills people sometimes. So make sure you know both ways out. That's all I have.
Thanks, Brad. Rigo, anything to add?
I really don't have anything to add. I think your guys' presentation covered a lot of the basic information. Obviously, anything that we would need further would be more extensive or more of an investigation. But I will piggyback on what Brad said and what his wife. Every time I go anywhere, I'm always looking to see how am I going to get out, or where a potential threat is coming from. And then your alarm from the bed, that's a great idea. I've never had heard that one before, but that's a great idea. And as you mentioned that you talked about was the don't make yourself a victim. Make yourself as confident, walk like you know where you're going, like you know what you're doing. Don't be afraid to make eye contact with people and let them know that you see them. Not only do they see you, you see them. And that confidence in and of itself is very good for protecting you.
Thanks. And I will say that I travel overseas all the time, and people are always, and it's just my son and I, and they're like, oh, you'll go walk the streets. And I'm like, yeah. And it is about how you carry yourself that makes a difference. Well, we could certainly stay here all day sharing information with you about emergency preparedness. There's literally that much information. However, we recognize that our short time together today, there was no way to cover everything. We try to give you information to start planning for emergencies and what to consider in those plans. And we'd like to open the session now for the Q&A. And if you post a question in the Q&A box, we'll answer them live. We'd also like to ask you to stay around. We have something special for a special raffle that we're going to do following the Q&A. Deb is going to draw 5 names, and those 5 individuals will be provided. Actually, I think we switched it to Jamie, but Deb or Jamie are going to draw 5 names, and those 5 individuals are going to be provided with an emergency readiness supplies kit and a bag. Each bag is worth up to $400 each. Items in the bag include random items that the Center for Disability Empowerment believed would assist a person with a disability during an emergency situation. And remember, this is not the end of your planning. Attending this training is not the end of your planning, but rather the beginning. Hopefully you will be adding things to what you've already gotten into place, or changing things depending on your needs and how thoroughly you like to prepare. Depending on your needs, you might need more than one to-go bag for different emergency types. So a potential, depending on where you are, different emergencies that you might encounter are floods, tornadoes, fires, explosions, viruses. I think we learned way more about that one this year than we ever thought we would. Chemical exposure, power outages, random car accidents or other types of accidents, snowstorms, a terrorist attack, active shooters. These are all different types of events, and our preparedness for them means different forms of planning. So you need to take a look at those items and what do you personally need to plan for. So I'm going to take a look at the Q&A. I do know that somebody had mentioned earlier, I'll touch on that how to have these kind of conversations with employers when you may not want to disclose, you're sensitive about disclosing your full disability. And I personally, and I'm going to ask Brad and Rigo to join in on this. I personally think if you are sensitive about sharing more information about your disability, then you make it about a workplace safety awareness. You connect with the local fire department or the police department. You find somebody to come in and do a workplace safety with everybody. And that becomes, a training mechanism for everybody. But also, again, it goes back to that individual responsibility of having what you need. If you are on a second floor and in an emergency that you're a wheelchair user like Marley, and you know that you cannot get down those stairs quickly, but the windows on your floor open up, you could have a ladder, right? That potentially you could have in your office space. You could have people that you feel close to that are designated and trained to help support you in that situation. So there are things you can do, but Brad and Rigo, what would you suggest in this situation where it's somebody at work who wants to make sure they're prepared, but they don't want to fully disclose their disability to an employer?
I'll start out. What we find a lot of times is people don't want to, and then we get there and we react afterwards. And had it been worse, something could happen to you. You've got to find that balance of, if you can communicate with them and feel safe, do it. But if you can't, contact your local fire department and say, hey, I work here. or your police department, I work here. I don't want to let them know I'm the reason for it, but we can come in and try to make contact with the right people to do an educational series. And we don't have a problem with that, but you got to talk to someone. To me, too many times we keep quiet, and I have a disability of myself, plus I'm on chemotherapy, and I get to where my safety's number one. So if you don't feel comfortable, have somebody else go to bat for you, or come to the fire department or the police department. We'll do our best.
Thank you, Rigo.
Yeah, agreed. I think however you feel comfortable, I think whatever the situation may be, you just work through it and either use us as a police department or Washington Township or wherever local FD, and say something. Otherwise, no one will be able to help you if you never say anything. And there may be resources available even through your local first responders or even through your employer that you may not be aware of just by virtue of not knowing about it. And so I think I would hope, and I guess I'm fortunate enough to work for the city of Dublin, that there's enough resources available within the city of Dublin that you could talk to someone that isn't directly connected to the police department, but works for the city, that you would feel comfortable in sharing some of the issues that you have or potential risks that you feel are there, and them be addressed from a leadership position versus it comes from the top down instead of from the bottom up. That's it.
Thank you. And I do want to identify that we're going to run a few minutes over. We do have a couple more questions, so hopefully you can hold on. Someone had put in the Q&A, when it comes to helping and communicating with individuals with disabilities, what about an individual who is nonverbal? Do you look for medical bracelets or any similar items? Do you think those items are helpful or beneficial? So I'm going to speak to that first, and then I'll ask Brad and Rigo. I would say absolutely. I actually, for my son, have purchased a road ID bracelet. And the reason I purchased that one is it looks just like all those other little plastic type rubber bracelets that everybody is wearing. But I have it personally engraved that identifies that he has autism and limited communication. And then it says music is calming, has my phone number, and it has the year that he was born in, has his name and the year he was born in. So that way nobody can steal his identifying information as far as his birth date, but they can easily go, oh, he's 18, right? And then also it has an additional emergency contact besides me. So it has my phone number and it says Mom D, and then my best friend Linda, it has her phone number. And then I also was able to order from them the little autism puzzle piece symbol that goes on this bracelet as well. And then when we go out to big events or we're traveling, he wears that 24/7. So if he ever gets separated, he knows he's supposed to point to that bracelet. Second of all, when I'm in a public venue, first thing I do, just like they were talking about looking for exits, I look for uniforms. 100% look for uniforms. And I go up and I say, to anybody in a uniform, I say, you see this tall, 6-foot redheaded boy? He has autism. You see him and you don't see this short, stout little redheaded woman with him. You capture him, you hold on to him, and I'll come find you, because he could get lost. And so I make sure I'm very proactive in those environments. But Brad and Rigo, do you guys also look for that identifying information?
Any information like that, yes, we look for that. A lot of times, like you said, they point to it if they already know that they're nonverbal and they're not in a crisis, they can point to it. Another key point, to keep in mind in those situations, if you go into large crowds or you're going into a big event, and we do this, and I think the FD does this at the Iris Festival. You take a picture of your kid and what they're wearing that particular day, if you're expecting to be in a large crowd. So if they do happen to get separated or go missing, one of the very first questions we're going to ask you is, what are they wearing and what do they look like? And in a panic situation, you'd be like, I think they were wearing this. I think that if you look at your picture, be like, this is exactly what he's wearing today and what he looks like today. And it seems kind of silly, but people take pictures all the time. And but yes, the bracelets, we do that at a lot of our events, like the Irish Festival, the 4th of July event. They register kids when they go into the kids area, but it's the same purpose. If they were to get separated from their parents, we're able to make contact with someone to come and pick them up or reunite them.
And the other thing we do is like the medical bracelets. Yeah. Like you said, they're getting so where it might be a watch. It might be something that looks cool, because if you didn't realize, some of the other ones, they weren't hip for the kids. They weren't hip for whatever. But yeah, we check it, especially if we have nobody around that can help us. We're looking, and some people wear them on their ankles. We look everywhere we can to see if there's something. There's even people that have tattoos now on their wrists. I mean, we look for anything that can identify what our issue is. And also with Rigo, I like the thing what he says, we take selfies enough. Let's take the selfies when we're going into a big event, so we know what everybody's looking like, what they're wearing. Because I don't know how many times at the Irish Fest we're getting called for a kid, but it's a very vague. We don't know what our kid was wearing, or we don't know what our, adult was wearing. Especially for the kid, they don't know what mom and dad's wearing. So the more we have pictures and know stuff, the more we can help out.
And the other thing too, to keep in mind is you can also do a state ID that identifies the disability, and it's a card, and you can put it in your wallet. So this is for adults. If they have a driver's license, you can register with that as well. So that way, if they're in a car accident, it identifies their disability, how to approach them, and things like that. And that's all right there. Another thing to consider as well is think about the adult or the child's language base. So like if my son would have gotten lost 2 years ago, a police officer going up to him would have said, what's your mom's name? And he would have been Mom, because that's my name to him. It's Mom. And so I had to very strategically say, what is your mom's name? Over and over again. And then he could say D marks and identify that. And it's really important to help them identify their personal identifying information, like their addresses and their parents' phone numbers, if at all possible, or for them to know where it is, if it's in their wallet or on their phone and things like that, to know where it is so they can quickly show it to a first responder. I want to go to another question that I saw that came in. Let's see here. And this is Brad and Rigo, I'm gonna let you guys handle this. In case of a fire, a window escape was planned while my disabled daughter was smaller, but now she's too heavy to lift and manipulate out the window, and she cannot stand on her own. What other options have you seen as alternative escape routes? Her only idea so far is to have a contractor modify the home and add another exit door, but that could be extremely costly. So is there any other suggestions you have for them being able to help their disabled daughter out of a window in case of an emergency when she's too heavy to lift?
When we talk about fire safety education and all people getting them out a window, we understand that kids become young adults and grow. And I think the best thing is you're going to have to figure out what's the best option for us. Even if you're not able to spend the money, because we know putting another door, another window, all this is very costly. Educating the fire department, getting them out into your house. If, I don't know where you live. If you're in Washington Township, please, in Dublin, get a hold of us. We want to come out and help you. The other thing is, if your fire department comes out and sees the issue, it might be one of them that, hey, the door has to be shut. We got to make sure the door's shut. We know where they're at. So if we get called, we go, hey, first thing you're doing is you're hitting that bedroom. That's the thing that's going to help us on our side. Now, on your side, if you're wanting to help self-extricate your daughter or your son or what, for everybody out there, I don't know necessarily if you're not able to afford to spend that money for an extra window, if that's the right thing to do, because, the education of people knowing where it's at is going to help us tremendously.
May I say something? You could also purchase an evacuation chair for your child too. Is that not an option maybe? They can be, we have one at the office, and an evacuation chair, just like some of the fire departments have them. You get transferred into it, and there's a lock system with it. So as you're rolling down the stairs, you can have control of the evacuation chair and safely get your child or adult individual with a disability down the stairs. Would a fireproof blanket even assist in that kind of situation, Brad? Could it save someone a few minutes until the fire department arrives to help?
Yeah, that would work. It would almost be the same principle. If the door's shut and you have that to where if the fire did come in there, it's going to give you a little more time. But the big thing is cutting the oxygen off, because we know if fire doesn't have oxygen, it's not going to get there. If that door's shut completely, it's going to give the time, if early activation of 911 is done and we get there and we know where we're going, is going to help. But the blanket, it wouldn't hurt.
Mhm.
Another idea too, that I'm going to jump in that I was thinking of is they have kind of like carpeted ramps that are built for animals to kind of walk up to a bed and things like that. So potentially what you could do is get your daughter close to that, shift her to that ramp, and then you go out the window first. She's already on the ramp and you're only pulling, you're not having to lift her. So that might be an idea as well. If it's on a first floor, obviously that's not going to work on a second floor, but if it's on a first floor of evacuation, that might help. The key is, it sounds like you're struggling to physically lift from one position versus being able, most of us can drag a person much easier than we could lift a person.
You definitely want to practice these things ahead of time too. For example, for me, because I'm a wheelchair user, if I'm on the ground and someone's trying to help me get up back into my chair, they could potentially hurt me with the way that they do it. So it is really important to practice these things so that you know what is the best leverage you have to help them down the stairs or out of the window. You don't want to get caught in the moment and you realize that what you had planned or what you had in your mind isn't going to work, and you could eventually hurt yourself and potentially hurt someone else too. So
Can I ask,
yeah,
mention this? I have a Facebook listener, Mr. Keith. He shared the wallet card, and hopefully I can show you
wonderful.
what that looks like. And what's on it is his name, his disability, how he responds to social communication. Because of my disability, I may have difficulty making eye contact. I may not be able to understand or comprehend your questions. I may have trouble expressing myself, and do not assume this alone constitutes suspicious behavior. Very interesting. Thanks, Keith.
But I get, like, with the whole practicing thing, I do want to tell you guys a little story. When there was an individual, when 9/11 happened, they were on the towers, they were quadriplegic because they practiced their plan ahead of time. They were able to escape and save some of their coworkers in the process too. An individual with blindness also practiced their evacuation plan at the office with their coworkers. And because they had practiced it and planned it out, they were also able to save themselves and others in the process too. So I'm sorry, please email me. So it really is critical to practice it, physically try to get through it, especially when your kiddos are in school still too. I know in high schools and middle schools, sometimes the youth with disabilities get taken out first or last, but they're not actually part of the evacuation process. That could be dangerous and hurtful for the student if they're not actively participating in the drills, should something happen. So again, practice, practice, practice.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut us off at this point so we can do our raffle. So let's do the raffle really quick. And then we also have one more little treat to share with you guys too.
I will share my screen so that I can pull up that raffle.
Thank you, Jamie.
No problem. Oops, no. Sorry, just getting set up here. Okay. So drum roll. Our first winner, Tina Wallace. Woohoo! Do I do all 5, Dee?
Yes.
Yes.
Dorothy Lewis. Jennifer. So that's 3. Oh, let me do it again.
Jennifer again.
Naima is our 4th winner. Lisa Ogletree. And forgive me, I can't count. Was that all 5?
Yes. Can we confirm that all 5 individuals are present right now?
I can.
Okay.
Well, yep, I can. Give me 1 second.
Yes, I did go through the chat, excuse me, and made sure that everybody was currently attending.
Wonderful.
Yep, they're all here. We're
Yep.
good.
Wonderful. So you guys are all going to get a big, large bag of supplies with some of the things that we showed throughout the presentation, and some other stuff in there too.
Ooh.
There's, what do we want to do next?
Okay, we should have your address because you should have had to submit it with your registration. That's why we were making sure we had the names and making sure you were on here. And then, so we're also going to be sharing with each of you a special gift following our presentation. It's going to be a binder with many resources about emergency planning. It will have information specific to various types of disabilities, as well as medical information cards and checklists for different kinds of emergencies that you can personally use, and then also some Columbus specific resources. So those things are going to be coming out to anyone who attended today. So we want to, thank you for attending today. And
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Marley.
I wanted to plug in as well. Remember in the beginning, I said we hosted an emergency readiness series. There are 14 presentations on our YouTube page specific to individuals with disabilities in different scenarios. So please check out the YouTube pages because it does break down information very specifically. And I think it's a lot of useful information for all of you.
Thank you. And then I would like to personally thank Brad and Rigo for joining us today, and they're going to join us again tonight and bringing their valuable experience and perspective to this session. And Marley and Deb and Jamie, everything that you guys have done to make this something that is beneficial for anyone who has a disability. And then Here is the contact information for Marley and myself if you have further questions. And if you have questions for Brad or for Rigo, feel free to get them to me and I will send them on to Brad and Rigo to respond to. Let's see, there are a couple of questions that are coming in very quickly. A lot of thank yous. You're very welcome. As a parent of someone with a disability, as well as Marley being a person with a disability, we recognize that this was so important for this information to be out there. And the YouTube links will be part of the resources. We will share that stuff with you too. So we are still like compiling all these resources together for the binder. So you're not going to get it tomorrow, I will tell you. But we wanted to make sure it was a comprehensive binder for you guys. So we will make sure that you get access to all of this stuff as soon as possible. And we want to thank you again for attending. And we hope to see you at a future event. Thank you, everyone.
So much. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe out there.